Oi! Wow. Am I working hard today? But it is an absolute pleasure to be here with all of you guys because this is the second episode, the second of Just the Tip with me, your host, Uncle Weezy. We're going to be doing a full card breakdown for the UFC Vegas 35 card that's coming up this Saturday. I've dressed up. I've got my smoking jacket. I poured myself a Paloma here, which I'm going to be sipping on during the show because it's been a long night, but there's going to be a lot of content on my channel at the end of the night, and I hope all of you guys find it helpful. I'd like to thank all of you guys for joining me tonight to talk about the UFC Vegas 35 card. I'm ready. I think we got Smooth Jimmy looking as ready as ever, and let's face it, this dude is usually ready, but in particular, he looks ready tonight. And we got some people who are ready to put just the tip into some of these stats here for all 12 fights so that we can kind of get an idea of, which way we're leaning. And then maybe we go balls deeper into those stats just a little bit more, a little bit later on in the week to determine whether we want to lay out some bets or not. And the first in the chat tonight is John. He's got that money bag there, and that's what we're looking to get every time from these bookies. We want their money. We don't want to give them ours. We want their money. So let's get it, John. Thanks for hanging out. We got DFS by the numbers hanging out in here saying Weezy is putting in the work today. I am, man. I am. But I like to get this content. I like to get it out early in the week so that you guys have more time to digest it, so that I'm done with my research early. And then it allows me to make some better bets because if the work's done earlier, I have more time to do analysis and I got more time to pick the best spots, that we think are going to cash. So we got to look at the stats in order to do that. We got to look at tape in order to do that. A lot of the hard work is already done. And the hard work was already done earlier today by myself and Monk Maddox here on a balls deep breakdown right here on my channel. We went balls deep into the Kevin Lee, Daniel Rodriguez fight, and it went over an hour. We went really into all those numbers, man. You guys got to check that out if you haven't already. I'd like to thank Monk for hanging out with me on my channel. It meant a lot. Had a great time. I'm going to probably do some work on his channel, and he's going to probably come back on mine. We hope to be doing that more often in the future for you guys. It was great. Sup to Monk. Go and check out his channel if you haven't already. And if you look at the last video that we did, the link to Monk's YouTube channel is in the description. My guy Chris here hanging out, one of my biggest supporters. Unk is still at the grind tonight. Gotta love it. Man, it's good to see you here, brother. I hope things are well with you. And we got another guy in here that is a friend of mine, Luke Diamond Phillips. I know that this gentleman here is a great fucking dude, and he's had a rough day yesterday. He lost a pet, and if anyone out there has pets and you know how rough that is when you lose one, please do me a favor and send this gentleman here some love. We can all use it at rough times in our lives. When we're there for each other, it makes the rough times a little bit easier to get through. Big ups, my man. Stay strong, and things will get brighter soon. We got Daz Files in the room. We got saying what a classy dame this Weezy is. Yeah, that's what I try to do, man. I'm in my finery for you guys. I consider this to be an honor hanging out with you, talking about the UFC. This is going to be a great card coming up. There's a lot of spots that I like. There's a lot of potential ass shavings on the table, and we are going to get to it at the end of the show. I'm going to give you Uncle Weezy's ass shaving of the week, which is cash 2 weeks in a row, thanks to Mr. Johnny Munoz Jr. 2 weeks ago, and then thanks to one Boom Kelleher last week, who turned into a wrestler and absolutely just from pillar to post dominated poor Domingo Pilardi. Thank you, Brian Boom Kelleher, for coming through on the inaugural episode of Just the Tip as the first ass shaving of the week to come through with flying colors. And we got Chris saying the Don Weezy, where's the cigar? Well, you know what? Smooth Jimmy's got the cigar right now, man. Look at the cigar in his hands. But, I can't really smoke and drink and talk to you guys about UFC, so I had to pick the two best. and it's going to be the alcohol and talking about the UFC. We have got Headley one in the room saying, I missed the early balls deep today. Glad to get to the tip at least. Hey, man, you can always go back and get balls deep after we go just the tip into all the matchups here. Thanks for hanging out, brother. Appreciate it. And Chris for the love MMA saying, better yet, a joint. That is better yet, isn't it? But I gotta be focused here for the next hour or so, because we're going to be talking about a lot of fights with you guys here. Chris saying, I already told you, Unc, to keep the top away from me. It's all yours. Yeah, man. And we appreciate you, brother. Thanks for hanging out. And yeah, man, this is great to hang out with you guys. I really appreciate this. I'm going to get into the stats now. I appreciate all you guys hanging out, but what we're going to do is we're going to really dig into the stats here, and we're going to do it for all these fights. So let's get these numbers up on the page. I have got the Mana Martinez versus Guido Cannetti statistics here. And let's just get into the advantages that these guys have over the particular categories that I have listed here on the page. And if we're going to start with the tail of the tape, we're going to see Mana Martinez absolutely having a fantastic advantage. He is 16 years younger. He's 4 inches taller, and he's got a 2-inch reach advantage. So he's obviously got a massive tail of the tape measurables advantage here. If we look at the pro experience, we see that Guido Cannetti's got 3 more fights as a pro. He's got 25 more minutes of cage time, almost 9 more years as a pro mixed martial artist. He's got 5 more fights at the UFC level and almost 50 more minutes in the UFC cage. He's fought almost half of his career at the highest level, while Martinez has been a regional scene fighter. Equal opportunity finisher, 3 by knockout, 3 by submission, 2 by decision. Martinez has been subbed in 50% of his losses, so there could be a potential path to a victory for Cannetti by submission. And we've got Martinez in the experience. We can see in the finish stats right here that Mana Martinez has finished 100% of his wins inside the distance by knockout. Cannetti has been finishing all 5 of his pro losses, 4 of them by submission, 1 of them by knockout. So this is definitely a spot where we're looking at a potential fight finishing inside the distance. If we go up here to the striking stats, we can see that Mana Martinez, the numbers that we get for striking are going to come from pre-UFC, but he's got sick power in his hands, you guys. He's got all 8 professional wins by knockout, and Cannetti has been knocked down on 2.7% of the significant strikes that he's absorbed. He's averaging 0.88 knockdowns allowed per 15 minutes. So there's definitely a clear path to victory via ass shaving here for Mana Martinez with his hands. He hits hard, you guys. But if we look at Guido Cannetti's striking numbers, they're not bad. He's landing 2.85 significant strikes a minute and only absorbing 2.17. He's got nice ratios and differences here. So even though he's been 2-4 in the UFC, it's not like his striking numbers are terrible statistically. If we look at the grappling advantages here, we'll notice that Cannetti is an active wrestler thus far in the UFC. He's 9 of 18 on his takedown attempts. He's averaging 2.64 takedowns per 15 minutes and 0.29 submission attempts per 15 minutes. Let's see, he is out-controlling his opponents at a 30% to 23% clip, and he's got 75% takedown defense in his own right. Martinez has not successfully defended a takedown in the UFC yet, so potentially Guido Cannetti might be able to get that offensive wrestling game going, get that jiu-jitsu game going, and try to do to Mana Martinez what Draco Rodriguez did to him when he subbed him earlier. And then if we look at Mana Martinez, even though Cannetti is comfortable on the ground, he's spending 53% of his time in control time positions in the cage. If we look at 30.21% control time for and 22.81% control time against, 53% of his fights are taking place in control time positions, and he's been subbed in 4 out of his 5 pro losses and in 3 of his 4 losses. So he is able to be finished on the ground. So just because Cannetti gets the fight to the ground, if we see these 4 submission losses here out of 5, we know that just because Cannetti gets the fight to the ground, it doesn't mean he's going to be successful there. Martinez could potentially submit him. And if we look at the strength of schedule advantages, we're going to definitely say that Guido Cannetti has fought the better range of competition over his career. He's fought a higher level of his career at the UFC level. So 50% of his career at the UFC level, he's lost fights to veterans like Cristiano Marcelo, Marco Beltran, Alejandro Perez, Henry Briones, Kyung Ho Kang, Marlon Vera, Dana Batgarel. I mean, all those guys are very good fighters. He lost to a couple of them on the Ultimate Fighter in the Ultimate Fighter House, so they're not official losses, but still. Guido Cannetti is losing to very good competition. He's fought the much better competition in his career than Martinez has at this point. He's got a 1.31 win-to-loss ratio of his opponents overall and a 1.67 in his wins over inexperienced competition that only have 4 total fights. So, I would definitely give the striking advantage to Martinez, the measurables advantage to Martinez, and he probably is going to starch him in the first round. But Guido Cannetti's more experienced. Guido Cannetti's a little bit better in terms of his grappling, and Guido Cannetti's fought the better competition over his career. So it's not really the clearest path for Martinez, but I still think that he's going to easily win this fight. I'm picking Martinez to win this fight inside the distance. I like the fight doesn't go to decision here because Guido Cannetti has been finished in all 5 of his pro losses, and Martinez has finished 100% of his pro wins, and they're giving Martinez like about an 80% implied probability chance to win this fight. So I do like that this fight could potentially finish inside the distance, and if Cannetti gets it to the ground, potentially he could submit Martinez. So the pick is Martinez. I like him to win inside the distance here against the 41-year-old Guido Cannetti. However, I also think the fight doesn't go to decision is an excellent bet. Let's move on to the next fight, which is going to be Jamaal Emmers versus Pat Sabatini. If we look at the measurables here, we will see that Pat Sabatini is 2 years younger. And the advantages for Jamaal Emmers is that he's 2 inches taller, and he's got a 4-inch reach advantage. So I would say that the measurables go to Emmers here. And if we look at experience, we see that Jamaal Emmers has 6 more professional fights than Pat Sabatini. He's got almost 100 more minutes in the pro cage and a year and a half more as a pro. He's got 2 more fights at the UFC level and 20 more minutes in the UFC cage. For Pat Sabatini, we're kind of looking at the finish numbers here, and we're seeing that he's got a 78% finish rate as a pro. He's got 9 wins by submission, 2 by knockout. So 11 of those 14 wins coming inside the distance. And Jamaal Emmers has been finished in 3 of his 5 pro losses, 2 of them by knockout, 1 of them by submission. So there could be a potential path for Sabatini to win inside the distance here. If we look at the striking stats, we don't have a lot of meat on the bone here for Pat Sabatini because he only has 1 UFC fight. However, Emmers is throwing a ton of volume, almost 11 significant strikes a minute. We can see that right here. And then we could see he's got 1 UFC knockdown and 208 significant strikes landed. He's got a 0.48% knockdowns per total significant strikes landed and 0.41 knockdowns per 15 minutes. He's got nice ratios and differences. He's landing 5.75 significant strikes a minute and only absorbing 4.65. And, that's a 1.1 significant strike difference. That's excellent. And he's got a decent 55% striking defense, not as good as Sabatini, but it's also a bigger sample size. While for Sabatini, we've got really nice ratios here in a 1-fight sample size. He controlled a major part of this fight. Landed 1.73 significant strikes per minute and only absorbed 1.27. He showed 62% striking defense and a 58% striking accuracy. Not only that, he got a knockdown So he's got 3.85% knockdowns per total significant strikes landed. So Pat Sabatini, if you watch the tape on him, he's got a pretty good striking game in his own right. If we look at the grappling statistics here, we see that Jamaal Emmers and Pat Sabatini have both went to the wrestling quite a bit in their fights, as Emmers does have an excellent wrestling pedigree. 7 of his 13 UFC takedown attempts have been successful for 53.85%. He's averaging 2.9 takedowns per 15 minutes, and he's out-controlling his opponents at a 21.66% to 2.21% rate. So he's been very good using his wrestling to control his opponents. As he's gotten 7 of 13 takedown attempts and successfully defended all 3 takedown attempts against him. If we look at Pat Sabatini in a one-fight sample size, we see that he's got 66.44% control time, and he's only given up about 9% control time. So about 75% of that fight was taking place in control time positions. So clearly, excuse me, just for a second. Apologize for that. 75% of Pat Sabatini's fight took place in control time positions. He's very comfortable on the ground. He's a jiu-jitsu black belt, and he's also got a good wrestling background as well. So Pat Sabatini and Jamaal Emmers are both very good on the ground. Emmers with more of just the pure wrestling base, although he does have some jiu-jitsu, but Pat Sabatini definitely a very skilled submission artist in his own right. And he does have a wrestling background as well, so he can use the wrestling to get to his jiu-jitsu. I'll have been talking on camera for about 3 hours today at the end of all of this, so I'm hoping my voice holds up here. If we look at the strength of schedule advantages here, not much to see because Pat Sabatini doesn't have any ratios. But Jamaal Emmers has 2 more UFC fights. He's fought the better competition thus far in the UFC. The loss versus Chikadze was actually very close. And Pat Sabatini's a former CFFC featherweight champion. He's used to training for 4-round fights. So I think that he's going to be very close in terms of skill level here to Jamaal Emmers. I'm going to pick Pat Sabatini to win this fight by decision. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I've just seen Pat exercise better fight IQ when he has been in the cage. Even though he kind of took his foot off the gas in the 3rd round in the debut fight against Tristan Connolly, he had clearly won the first 2 rounds. And I feel like that was a decent decision to get him to win the fight, to bank that first win. He said he had some octagon jitters, and that did affect him. But even though it affected him, he still made the right choices at the right times and showed, even though it was his first UFC fight, that he has the ability to make decisions that are going to help him win fights in the cage while the fight is happening. And so I'm going to go, because I think it's such a close fight, I'm going to go with the higher fight IQ that I've seen out of Sabatini. To me, I still haven't gotten over the fact that Jamaal Emmers it took him 8 minutes or 7 minutes to attempt a takedown against Giga Chikadze. That, to me, I can just never get past that. So I'm going to pick Sabatini to win this fight by decision. The next fight, JJ Aldrich versus Vanessa Demopoulos. This line is super wide. This is it's very easy to break down this fight. There's a huge measurables advantage here for JJ Aldrich because Vanessa Demopoulos is not a big girl. We've got 4 years younger JJ Aldrich. She is 4 inches taller, and she has a whopping 8-inch reach advantage here. 8 inches, people. I thought that Vanessa Demopoulos' reach was 62 because UFC Stats did not have it on their website, so I got it from either Sherdog or Tapology. But it turns out if you go to UFC Stats, Vanessa Demopoulos' reach is 59 inches. That's leaving her at a 8-inch reach disadvantage against a really solid striker in JJ Aldrich. JJ Aldrich is also a southpaw. If we look at the experience numbers here, we see that JJ Aldrich has 4 more professional fights. She's got over 50 more minutes in the cage. She's fought almost 2/3 of her pro career at the UFC level. So definitely out of those 13 fights, 8 of them at the UFC level. So she's fought a much higher level of her career at the highest level than compared to Demopoulos, who's only had one Contender Series fight in 9 career fights. So obviously JJ Aldrich has faced and beaten the better competition. We see 3 more years as a pro for JJ Aldrich. She's got 7 more UFC fights, 5 UFC wins, almost 100 more minutes in the UFC cage. If we look at Vanessa Demopoulos, we do see that she's got a 50% win rate by submission. 4 of her 6 pro wins are inside the distance. And Aldrich has been finished in half of her pro losses, once by knockout, once by submission. So there potentially could be a path for Vanessa Demopoulos if she does make something happen in this fight. JJ Aldrich has been finished in half of her pro losses. So, this is still going to be a very tough road to hoe for Vanessa Demopoulos, being the much smaller girl here, taking this fight on short notice, and then just the giant, measurables disadvantages that she's at here. It's really pops off the page when you're seeing an 8-inch reach disadvantage. If we're looking at the striking statistics here, we can see we've only got a 1-fight sample size for Vanessa Demopoulos. Aldrich has got a solid 62% striking defense. She's never been knocked down, and Demopoulos has not shown great striking thus far. I mean, without question, Aldrich should be the much better striker here. In terms of grappling, Vanessa Demopoulos is definitely more of a grappler than JJ Aldrich is. But JJ Aldrich still is 6 of 15 on her takedown attempts. That's 40%, not bad at all. She's out-controlling her opponents at a 17% to 8% clip. So she's definitely, even though she's known more as a striker, she's been able to keep her fights at striking range more than 75% of the time and has out-controlled her opponents at a 2-to-1 clip. So she's done pretty well, even though her takedown defense isn't great, at keeping the fight on the feet and out-controlling her opponents. Aldrich is going to be the bigger, stronger fighter here, and Demopoulos was out-controlled by a 74% to 1% clip against Corey McKenna. So, it's going to be difficult for Vanessa Demopoulos to find takedowns here, to take down the much bigger JJ Aldrich, and to find any kind of success on the ground because, frankly, she's just going to be so much smaller. But Demopoulos is a solid submission grappler, and Aldrich has poor takedown defense. She's only got 57.14% takedown defense. She's successfully defended 8 of 14 takedown attempts against, and she is getting taken down 0.8 times per 15 minutes. But what's important to note here is that JJ Aldrich is at 113 minutes of cage time, and she's only been controlled 7.61% of the time. So that's about 8 minutes of control time on 6 takedowns. So JJ Aldrich seems to have a pretty good get-up game. And the strength of schedule is obviously in favor of Aldrich here, having fought most of her career at the UFC level. So, yeah, this is a fight that's going to probably be one-way traffic. JJ Aldrich, a big favorite for a reason. I'm not going to be betting this fight because the line is just frankly too wide. But, the pick is JJ Aldrich by decision. So we've got Dustin Jacoby versus Darren Stewart up next. So let's have a look-see. We've got the tail of the tape up here. We can see that Dustin Jacoby is 3 inches taller, and he's got a 2-inch reach advantage over Darren Stewart, and Darren Stewart's going to be the younger man here by 3 years. If we look at the experience numbers, oh my God. Sorry, guys. Like my other document is up on a page, and it's just hard to scroll. If we look at the experience numbers here, very close. Jacoby's got 3 more years as a pro, 10 years, 8 months compared to 7 years, 2 months. And he's got an extensive pro kickboxing career as well as MMA. But Darren Stewart's got 1 more fight. He's got 25 more minutes of cage time. He's got 7 more UFC fights, though. So the experience advantage here really for Stewart is the fact that he's fought more of his career at the highest level. 7 more UFC fights, 2/3 of his pro career has been at the UFC level, while for Jacoby, it's about 1/3. He's got 50 more minutes of UFC cage time as Darren Stewart. And he's got a 68% finish rate. Not bad. 8% by submission, 58% by KO. And Jacoby has been KO'd once in his 5 losses, so potentially a path there. And then if we look at the striking stats here, let me get these scrolled down. Hang on. Jacoby has got the better UFC striking ratios for sure. He's landing 4.45 significant strikes a minute. He's only absorbing 3.35. He's got 3 UFC knockdowns in 328 significant strikes landed. That comes out to a 0.91% knockdown per total significant strikes landed and a 0.61 knockdowns per 15 minutes. He's got 61% striking defense, which is very good. He's an accomplished kickboxer with size and reach advantages. He should be the better striker here in comparison to Stewart. But Stewart hits really hard. He's got great power in his hands. He's got 2 UFC knockdowns and 374 significant strikes landed. He's got a 0.53% knockdowns per total significant strikes landed. And Jacoby's been knocked down on 0.81 of the significant strikes that he's absorbed, which we can see right over here. So there could potentially be a path for knockdown here for Darren Stewart. He's got a solid chin, too. He's only been knocked down once in 13 UFC fights and 385 significant strikes absorbed. So Darren Stewart is very tough. In terms of grappling for this fight, I don't know what to talk to you guys about here. Neither one of these guys really does anything great in the grappling realm. Darren Stewart's got 13 takedowns in 13 fights. He's been taken down twice as many times as he's taken his opponents down. Dustin Jacoby, 2 takedowns in 6 fights, and he's been taken down 7 times as much as he's taken down his opponents. So both these guys are getting out-grappled by their opponents. Both these guys are getting out-controlled by their opponents. Darren Stewart getting out-controlled 16% to 35%. So 51% of Darren Stewart's fights are taking place in control time positions, while for Jacoby, it's about 29. So, maybe Darren Stewart can drag this fight to the ground, keep it on the cage, and he might be a little more comfortable there. But Dustin Jacoby's pretty good in the clinch. If we look at the strength of schedule numbers here, Stewart's got a 1.2 ratio overall compared to 0.76 for Jacoby. The ratio is 1 in both of their wins, and a little bit better losses for Darren Stewart here. But Jacoby losing to the more experienced opponents, it's actually pretty close. Everything in this fight, I just think that Jacoby's going to have the clear advantage on the feet. If it does go to the grappling, Stewart should have a slight advantage. But, in terms of strength of schedule, I would give it to Darren Stewart. In terms of grappling, I don't think much is going to happen here in the grappling. In terms of striking, I'm giving it to Jacoby. And the measurables are close, and the experience is close. I think the value might be on Darren Stewart here as the underdog, as Darren Stewart right now is a plus about 150 on the aggregate, a plus 151 on the aggregate. I think everything about this close fight is going to be pretty close. I would not lay that kind of juice on Dustin Jacoby. I think Dustin Jacoby can get the job done, but I would not lay. I don't like him at these odds here. I think he is the better striker, but there's no guarantee that this fight is just going to take place at striking range, as over half of Darren Stewart's fights have taken place in control time positions, and that's in a 13-fight sample size. So I'm going to actually pick the underdog here in Darren Stewart to win a greasy-ass decision. Let's see here. We're about 28 minutes in. I'm glad you guys are sticking around with me. I hope this is helping you guys out. I am just kind of scrolling through the chat here, trying to get as much stuff done in the shortest amount of time as possible. And then after the ass shaving of the week, I'll answer some questions for you guys. But let's move on to this next fight here. What do we have next? It looks like we've got Sam Alvey versus Wellington Turman. This is a fight I have a bet on. But let's get into the measurables here. We see Wellington Turman is going to be 10 years younger, and that's huge. But in terms of the other measurables, we got a 2-inch height advantage and a 3-inch reach advantage. And Sam Alvey is a southpaw, while Wellington Turman is an orthodox fighter. In terms of the experience numbers, obviously it's all Alvey. We can just take a look at what's up there on the screen. 29 more pro fights. 350 more minutes as a pro. 6 more years as a pro, 17 more UFC fights, almost 170 more minutes in the UFC cage. Sam has fought 40% of his career at the UFC level, while for Turman, it's less than 20%. 58% of Sam's pro wins, 19 of them, by the way, are by KO. And Wellington Turman has been knocked out in 2 of his 5 pro losses, and it happens to be his last 2 losses. He was brutally knocked out just 2 months ago by Bruno Blindado Silva, and he is making a very short turnaround to come against the Sam Alvey, the very hard-hitting, smiling redhead here. I don't like this for Turman, you guys. Measurable advantage for Sam Alvey. Experience advantage for Sam Alvey. In terms of the finishing stats, Sam Alvey has got a lot of wins by knockout, and we have seen Turman get knocked out quite a bit. If we take a look at these striking stats, you'll see what I'm talking about. We've got Sam Alvey is a patient, very patient, effective counter striker. He's very low volume. He definitely got power in his hands, though. I mean, we're talking about a massive, massive 21 fight sample size here in the UFC, and he's got a 1.06% knockdowns per total significant strikes landed, which means he's landing a knockdown on 1 out of every 100 significant strikes. That's a really good percentage for a guy that's had 21 fights. He's averaging 0.51 knockdowns per 15 minutes. He's only been, and Turman has been knocked down once, but he's been knocked out twice in his last 2 fights. So there's definitely a path to victory here via KO for Sam. And look at this. This is the worst part. A 43.19% striking defense for Wellington Turman. Wellington Turman is going to desperately need to get this fight to the ground, because if he doesn't, he blocks punches with his face, and Sam Alvey hits very hard. And we've seen this guy's chin cracked twice just this year. So, and we see that 0.68% knockdowns for total significant strikes allowed. He's getting knocked down 0.38 times for 15 minutes. And he's absorbing 3.75 significant strikes a minute while only landing 2.44. So I don't like the striking statistics here for Wellington Turman at all. I'm giving Sam Alvey a solid advantage in the striking statistics. Grappling advantages. Sam prefers to keep the fight standing. He's successfully defended 47 of 57 takedown attempts against. Look at that right here. Only 10 of 57 successful for his opponents. Sam Alvey is showing 82.46% takedown defense, and he's only yielded 14% control time against a 21-fight sample size. In addition to that, Turman has been a very inefficient wrestler, as he's only gotten 6 out of 27 takedown attempts for 22.22%. He is averaging 2.31 takedowns per 15 minutes, but he's not getting them at a good rate. He's got 42.15% control time, and he's yielding 25.52% control time. So we do see a clash of of styles here, as about 80% of Sam Alvey's fights are taking place at striking range, while for Wellington Turman, it's about 33. Yeah, it's about 32. So way, way more percentage of fights have been taking place at striking range for Alvey, and that's because he's comfortable there, and because he's very comfortable there, as a matter of fact. And we see that in the takedown defense, and we even see that even more in this number right here. 6 takedown attempts in 21 fights, only 1 successful takedown. When you see something like that out of a veteran like Alvey, it's just basically telling you that this guy is comfortable striking, and he's good at keeping it in the striking range. If this fight stays in the striking range, Wellington Turman's going to lose. And then if we talk about Turman's a black belt, though. Turman's a very good grappler in his own right. And he's a BJJ black belt, and 7 of his 16 pro wins are by submission. So if this fight gets to the ground, and we see that, Turman's fights, about 68% of them are spent in control time positions. If he's actually successful getting Sam Alvey controlled and taking him down, he's going to probably win this fight. But Sam Alvey has not been easy to control at all. and that's going to be a tough road to hoe. In terms of the strength of schedule, Sam Alvey's fought, beaten, and lost to the tougher, more experienced competition. He's got way more experienced. He's fought a higher percentage of his career at the highest level and has better wins and lost to the tougher competition. So I am picking Sam Alvey. I have a 1-unit bet at plus 130 on him. I am picking him to win by knockout in the second round. I think he's going to sleep Wellington, Turman, and make it 3 straight knockout losses in a row. Let's look at the next fight, which is a guy who has let me down several times recently, in Abdul Razak Alhassan, and he is facing Alessio Manzo de Chirico. So let's get into the numbers here. The measurables. We see that de Chirico is 4 years younger. He's 2 inches taller, and he's got a 1-inch reach advantage. So all the measurables advantages here are on the de Chirico side, and that's not surprising because we know Abdul Razak Alhassan is just a welterweight who stopped being able to make weight. Not because he's too big, probably because of diet or just not enough commitment. So now he's been pushed up to middleweight. He lost his middleweight debut against a very green fighter in Jacob Malkoun, who came into that fight, I believe, with 5 professional fights, and he dominated Abdul Razak Alhassan from pillar to post. If we look at the experience advantages here, we see that Alessio de Chirico has 4 more pro fights. He's got about 70 more minutes of professional cage time. He's got 2 more years as a pro, 1 more UFC fight, 45 more minutes in the UFC cage. He's got 77% career finish rate, 46% by knockout, 31% by sub. So he is very good at finishing inside the distance. But you know who's better? Alhassan, as he's got a 100% finish rate, all by knockout, all in the first round. So, Abdul Razak Alhassan has not won recently, but when he does win, and he's got 10 professional wins, all 10 of them are by knockout, and all 10 of them are in the first round. So he is very dangerous early in fights. If we look at the striking numbers here, those power numbers will jump off the page at you. Abdul Razak Alhassan has devastating power, you guys. He's got 6 UFC knockdowns and only 200 significant strikes landed. He's got a 3%, as we see right here, knockdowns per total significant strikes landed, and he has got 1.63 knockdowns per 15 minutes. We look at de Chirico, and he lands more than he absorbs at 3.3 compared to 3.24. He's got decent power. He's landing a knockdown on almost 1% of the significant strikes that he lands at 0.9%, 0.44 knockdowns per 15 minutes. Alhassan has actually been knocked down on 0.43% of the significant strikes landed against him. And he was knocked out by a jab by Chaos Williams. So he's allowing 0.27 knockdowns per 15 minutes in his own right, while Alessio de Chirico has only been knocked down once in 329 significant strikes landed. Both these guys have got a pretty good chin, but we did see Alhassan's cracked against Chaos Williams. Even though Alhassan's got the power here, I think he's got a striking advantage for maybe about 90 to 120 seconds. And then from there on out, it's going to be all Alessio de Chirico. But we do have to always keep in mind that Alhassan's win condition comes in about the first 2 minutes of the fight. And so you can always hedge a big bet on Alessio de Chirico with a first-round knockout prop by Abdul Razak Alhassan, which you can get at like plus 400, plus 500, maybe even plus 600. So you might be able to get a good-sized money line bet on de Chirico if you like him to win, and still hedge that with Alhassan's only win condition. If we look at the grappling numbers here, we will see that Alhassan has got a very solid judo base, but he doesn't use it well. De Chirico is going to be the better grappler here. He is a very efficient wrestler. 11 of 24 on his takedown attempts. So he's attempting about 2.5 takedown attempts per fight, but he's gotten 45.83% of them. He's getting 1.62 takedowns per 15 minutes, and he's out-controlling his opponents just slightly at 10.57% to 9.2%. But Chirico has shown excellent takedown defense, successfully defending 20 of 24 takedowns attempt, 83.33% takedown defense. He's getting taken down only 0.59 times for 15 minutes and controlled less than 10% of his UFC cage time. And the other thing here that we got to look at is the terrible takedown defense of Abdul Razak Alhassan at just below 55%. His opponents have been successful on 19 of 42 takedowns. He's getting taken down 5.16 times per 15 minutes and getting controlled 42.49% of the control time, while he's only controlling his opponent 7.3% of the time. So 50% of Abdul Razak's cage time is taking place in control time positions where he's completely useless, where he has no advantage whatsoever. So Abdul Razak Alhassan needs to keep the fight standing in order to be successful, and he's only been successful keeping the fight standing 50% of the time. That really severely reduces his win condition here. And if we look at the strength of schedule numbers, we're also going to see that Monzo has fought the better competition, more experience, better win-loss ratio. His wins have a 1.14 win-loss ratio, while it's it's about 2/3 for Alhassan. And the losses are close, but Chirico is losing to the more experienced competition. We look at names on Chirico's resume like Julian Marquez, Kevin Holland, Makhmoud Muradov, Zach Cummings, Joaquin Buckley. And a losses here for Abdul Razak Alhassan to Jacob Malkoun, to Chaos Williams, to Munir Lazez. He beat Nico Price. He beat Sambahu Masi twice. But one thing that I want to mention here is that Joaquin Buckley is a lot like Abdul Razak Alhassan. He's got big power. He hits hard, and that's how he wins fights. Alessio Chirico just knocked out a much bigger version and a much hotter version of Abdul Razak Alhassan in his last fight, and he knocked him out in the first round. I'm big on Alessio Chirico here. I think Abdul Razak Alhassan is done. I've said it to myself after his last 3 fights. I promised myself I would never bet on him again. And if I do bet on Chirico, I might even just hedge a third of my exposure to that first round knockout prop. But yeah, I'm picking Alessio Chirico to win this fight. I don't care whether he wins it inside the distance, because I'm frankly just going to bet the money line on this. But I'm picking Alessio Chirico, and I'm very confident on it. So how many more fights do we have left, you guys? We got Muradov, Meerschaert, Petroski, Gilmore, Lee Rodriguez, Turcios, Houston, Urbina battle, and the main event. We are halfway through this show, gentlemen, and we are 42 minutes in. So once again, I am failing miserable trying to keep this show to 1 hour. But you know what? The more information, the more better. So let's take a little sip of my beverage here and get into the second half of the show. I did a balls deep breakdown on this fight earlier this week on Monday. This is one of my favorite fights on the card. It's going to be a banger. Makhmoud Muradov is an absolute stud. We can see that Muradov is going to be 2 years younger. He's going to be 1 inch taller here. And Gerald Meerschaert is going to have a 2-inch reach advantage, and he is the southpaw. We have got an experience advantage for Meerschaert, and that's saying something, because Makhmoud Muradov is a very experienced mixed martial artist with 31 professional fights. But Gerald Meerschaert making him look like a rank amateur over here, as he has 46 fights. So Meerschaert's got 15 more professional fights. He's got 50 more minutes of cage time. He's got 5 more years as a pro. And he's fought almost 30% of his pro career at the UFC level, while for Muradov, it's less than 10%. He's got 10 more UFC fights than Muradov. He's got 50 more minutes in the UFC cage. Meerschaert is a very gifted submission grappler. This guy has got 24 career wins by submission. That's 24 of his 32 career wins. So 75% of his wins are coming inside the distance by submission, and he's got some knockouts too. He's got 6 knockouts, I believe. So yeah, we're talking about a 94% finish rate for Gerald Meerschaert. That is crazy. In a 32 win career, this guy has finished 30 of them. That is unbelievable. So both of these guys gifted finishers, as we got Makhmoud Muradov finishing 80% of his wins, 20 of his 25 wins coming inside the distance, 68% by knockout, 12% by sub. And very interesting here, Gerald Meerschaert, one of the biggest dogs on the card. However, we're talking 24 of 32 professional wins for Gerald Meerschaert by submission. And Makhmoud Muradov, in his 6 losses, 3 of them have been by submission. So there could be a path by submission, as there's a path for submission in any Gerald Meerschaert fight. So let's not count him out completely, as we do see that the stats are telling us that in 6 professional losses, 4 of them have come inside the distance from Muradov. They came a long time ago, because this dude Muradov's on a 14-fight win streak right now. So you're going to have to go pretty far in the past to find the last time that he lost. But 3 of those losses have come inside the distance and by submission. So we got to keep that in mind for Meerschaert here. Let's have a look-see. We've got striking stats. Now, striking is where Makhmoud Muradov just absolutely shines. He's got fantastic ratios, and he's got nice power. He's landing 5.32 significant strikes a minute, and he's only absorbing 2.92. Isn't that crazy? That's a fantastic ratio. He's landing a knockdown on 0.45% of the significant strikes that he's landing. That averages out to 0.36 knockdowns for 15 minutes. And Gerald Meerschaert's been chinny. He's getting knocked down on 0.9% of the significant strikes that he's absorbing for 0.49 knockdowns per 15 minutes. So Muradov has also been very hard to hit. He's got a 64.86% striking defense. That'll put him right up there with Marvin Vettori in the best of the division. This is a guy who, when he's on his feet, he moves so well. He's constantly moving laterally. He's constantly cutting angles. When he doesn't throw in combination, he's in and then he's back out on an angle and he resets. Everything that Muradov does as a mixed martial artist striker makes him look like a pure boxer, like he should actually be in a boxing ring, only allowed to use his hands and footwork in order to dominate his opponents. He's on a different level striking, especially than Gerald Meerschaert. But he's on a different level striking than the rest of this division, with the exception of a guy like Israel Adesanya right now. Makhmoud Muradov is the real deal, you guys. Gerald Meerschaert is definitely a better grappler than a striker. However, he hasn't been completely outclassed in the striking. He's shown decent power. He's got 0.33 knockdowns for 15 minutes and landing a knockdown on 0.6% of the significant strikes that he's landing. And he's averaging 0.33 knockdowns per 15 minutes. So Meerschaert's not terrible, but he's going to be out of his depth here with Makhmoud Muradov. Now, if we talk about the grappling numbers, this is interesting. Muradov, what we have to look at is not the offensive really numbers here, 1 out of 6 takedowns. We don't care about that. Here's what we care about. 2.41% control time for Makhmoud Muradov, 2.81% control time against. So for a guy who's an incredible striker and who's going to outclass his opponents on the feet, he's keeping over 94% of his fights at striking distance. While for Gerald Meerschaert, we see that clash of styles here, as over 50% of his fights are taking place in control time positions. So Makhmoud Muradov has shown 100% takedown defense. He shows great movement, and he shows great footwork. If Gerald Meerschaert is unsuccessful trying to get this fight to the ground, Muradov is going to make this look easy. And the fact that Muradov has kept 94% of his fights at striking distance and shown 100% takedown defense thus far is making me feel real good about his chances to make this a 15-fight winning streak and to knock Gerald Meerschaert out early. So we just went over this. Very comfortable in the grappling exchanges, Meerschaert. He is an efficient wrestler. He's gotten 14 of 32 takedown attempts. So that's very good. And his takedown defense looks terrible, but that's because he doesn't care if he gets taken down. You shoot on Meerschaert, he's folding like a lawn chair. He'll gladly go to the ground. He doesn't care if you're on top or if he's on top. He just wants to fight on the ground. That's where he's at his best. Yeah, and he's averaging 2.28 takedowns for 15 minutes and 1.79 sub attempts for 15 minutes. So he's very active once he gets it to the ground, trying to finish the fight. And, 50% in control time positions, almost 24% control time for Meerschaert. Very, very happy to be in those grappling exchanges. If we look at the strength of schedule, we see that Muradov has fought the little bit more experienced competition, but Meerschaert has fought the better win-loss competition. Muradov's wins are better, though, at 1.08 ratio. The ratio is better for Meerschaert, but we see that Meerschaert's opponents that he's beating are less than half as experienced as Muradov. And, and the guys that are beating Meerschaert have an average record of 6.33 and 4.17, 10.5 total fights, 1.52 ratio. So he's losing a real good competition. Guys like Eric Anders, Hamzat Kamaev, Ian Heinisch. And, Muradov has won 3 in a row, 2 knockouts over Andrew Sanchez and Trevor Smith, both of them in the 3rd round, and a win by decision over Alessio Di Chirico in a close fight. And then he beat 2 UFC veterans in Wendell Oliveira and Alberto Uda before coming to the UFC. So I am picking Makhmoud Muradov to win this fight. I'm going to pick him to win by knockout and inside the distance here. But if you want to hedge it, you could probably get Meerschaert by sub by like plus 650. So you might be able to hedge that a little bit. But if you get the inside the distance line from Muradov, I think that you're going to hit on that. Gerald Meerschaert has been finished in 78% of his pro losses. So if Muradov wins, there's a very good chance with his 80% finish rate and with Meerschaert's rate of getting finished 78% inside the distance, that it'll probably be an inside the distance win for Makhmoud Muradov. I am picking that one for sure. This Petroski-Gilmore fight, I'm not going to get into much. This has all the makings of a very clean ass shaving here. You got Petroski, who's 4 years younger, an inch taller, a switch stance fighter, just the much better fighter. This Micheal Gilmore was a short notice replacement. He doesn't have much of a record. He's 5-3 as a pro. He took the fight on short notice against Gilbert Urbina in the house. He was an alternate. He stepped up. He quit his job so that he could maybe have an opportunity to fight. Well, unfortunately for Micheal Gilmore, he got the opportunity to fight on like 24 hours notice. So it didn't go well. He was finished quickly, but I just don't see much out of this guy. Petroski's got a really good grappling game. He's a good top game, good wrestler. And Gilmore gave up a submission so quickly. All 3 of Gilmore's losses have come inside the distance, 100% by submission. There is a very clear path to victory via ass shaving, via submission for Andre Petroski. There's a reason that the line is minus 575 on Petroski here. We don't want to overthink this fight. Petroski inside the distance. This is another one that's going to be an ass shaving. And let's not overthink it. Here's one we need to overthink, though, you guys. One of my favorite fights on the card. My man Monk and I just did a balls deep breakdown of this on my channel. So you can go and check that out after this show is over if you haven't seen it already. Daniel Rodriguez, Kevin Lee, definitely the best fight on the card that isn't the main event. And I can't wait to talk about this one with you guys. So if we look at the measurables, some surprising things here, because you would think that Kevin Lee being the natural lightweight and Daniel Rodriguez being the natural welterweight, that we would just see all the measurables advantages being in Rodriguez's favor. However, that's not the case. Kevin Lee's 6 years younger than Daniel Rodriguez. That's a big advantage right there. Even though Kevin Lee's the more experienced mixed martial artist, and he's been doing this for 3 years longer, he's 6 years younger. And Kevin Lee's got a 3-inch reach advantage. That's important because Daniel Rodriguez is a really good distance striker, but he's gonna be at a 3-inch reach disadvantage here, even though he's 4 inches taller than Kevin Lee. If we look at the experience numbers, we're going to see Kevin Lee 7 more professional fights, 100 more minutes of UFC or of just regular cage time. He's got 3 more years as a pro. He's got 10 more UFC fights at 17 to Rodriguez's 7. He's got almost 75% of Kevin Lee's professional experience has been at the UFC level. So this guy's been fighting killers since the start. While for Daniel Rodriguez, it's less than half. Let's see, we got about 120 more minutes in the UFC cage for Kevin Lee, and 11 of 18 pro wins inside the distance for Kevin Lee, 8 of them by submission, 3 of them by knockout. And Daniel Rodriguez is a great finisher in his own right. He's finished 80% of his pro wins by knockout. That's 12 of them out of the 15 wins have been inside the distance, 8 by knockout, and 4 by submission. So yeah, Lee has been finished in 4 out of his 6 losses. So there's a potential if Daniel Rodriguez wins this fight, it could happen inside the distance, as we've seen Kevin Lee subbed in 3 out of his 6 losses and knocked out in 1 out of his 6 losses. If we look up here at the striking numbers, we're going to see that the volume is the thing that really jumps off the page here, in my opinion. Kevin Lee's got really nice striking ratios. He lands 4. He only absorbs 3.31. He's only been knocked down twice in 650 significant strikes absorbed. So 650, and he's only been knocked down on 0.3% of the significant strikes that he's absorbed. 0.15 knockdowns allowed per 15 minutes. So Kevin Lee's very tough. But look at these numbers. Daniel Rodriguez landing 8.07 significant strikes a minute and only absorbing 5.71. He's throwing 16.5 significant strikes per minute, while Lee only throws 9.31. And his opponents are, throwing 13.17. So he's been in the much higher volume fights. He's shown better power at 0.66% knockdowns per total significant strikes landed, 0.8 knockdowns per 15 minutes, and he 48% striking accuracy, or almost 49 in comparison to 43 for Lee. And then he's even better defensively, as he's getting knocked down on a lower percentage of the significant strikes that he's absorbing, and he's showing about a 5% better striking defense. So I think as long as this fight takes place at distance, that Daniel Rodriguez is definitely going to have the advantage. But when we go down here to the grappling statistics, we're going to see the same thing in this fight that we saw in the Muradov fight that we just talked about. And that's one guy in Kevin Lee who's pushing 52% total control time positions in his fight, compared to the boxer Daniel Rodriguez, whose control time positions are less than 10%. So we've got the clash of styles again. The grappler in Kevin Lee versus the striker in Daniel Rodriguez. Who's going to be more successful in implementing their game plan? Well, Kevin Lee's been 43 of 99 on his takedown attempts landed. So that's a very good 43.43% takedown percentage. He's definitely spending a lot of time on top. He's a relentless wrestler, you guys. Very heavy on top when he gets there. He does favor position over submission. 43 out of 99 on those takedown attempts for 43.84%. And we've got Lee out-controlling his opponents 43.84 to 7.58. And he's averaging 3.29 takedowns per 15 minutes and almost 1 submission attempt per 15 minutes. While Daniel Rodriguez prefers to keep the fight standing. And thus far in 7 UFC fights, he has successfully defended 15 out of 18 takedown attempts, 83.33% takedown defense. That's a number you definitely want to see when you're going to be fighting a guy like Kevin Lee, who's clearly more comfortable when the fight is taking place in the wrestling and the grappling. Rodriguez is clearly more comfortable standing, as over 90% of his fights have taken place at striking range, and he's very good at keeping the fights there. 5 of 9 on takedowns in his own right. He's getting 1 takedown per 15 minutes, but those 5 takedowns have resulted in about 7.4, 0.7. it's like 1 minute of control time. So, even if Daniel Rodriguez takes you down, he's not even trying to hold you down there. He's not trying to grapple with you. It's just probably as a way to maybe get some points and then get back up to the boxing where he's more comfortable. Strength of schedule, you guys, is going to be a big advantage here for Kevin Lee. We can see the ratios, 2.08 for Kevin Lee's overall opponents, and it's 1.47 for Rodriguez. And Lee's fighting the guys that are twice as experienced as the guys that Rodriguez is fighting. Average opponent of a Lee, average record of a Lee opponent, 9.2 and 4.4. Well, it's only 4 and 2.7 for Daniel Rodriguez. The wins for Kevin Lee are super impressive. He's beating guys that have an average 2.05 win-to-loss ratio and 11.36 total fights. And not to take anything away from Daniel Rodriguez, because he's got a 1.63 ratio, which is excellent, and 7 total fights, which is fairly experienced UFC competition in his own right. And then if we look at who they lose to, Daniel Rodriguez probably really hasn't lost. He should have won that decision against Nick Dalby. And we see the guys that are beating Kevin Lee have like a 12-6 record. So they're killers. 17.67 total fights and a 2.12 win-loss ratio. We see Kevin Lee just fighting the much tougher competition. Charles Oliveira, Gregor Gillespie, Rafael Dos Anjos, Raging Al, and Edson Barbosa. While the names on Rodriguez's resume, Gabe Green, Dwight Grant, Nick Dalby, Mike Perry, Preston Parsons, and a big win over Tim Means via submission. He got a guillotine over Tim Means. Daniel Rodriguez is the underdog here, but I'm picking Kevin Lee. I like that 3-inch reach advantage. I like the conditioning. I love the fact that this is only a 3-round fight. Kevin Lee is relentless. I think he's built to fight 3-round fights. He can keep up that relentless wrestling style for 15 minutes, but 25 minutes is way too much to ask. I know Daniel Rodriguez is going to be the bigger man, and I know that this is going to be the biggest dude that Kevin Lee has ever fought, but I think it's a unique challenge for Daniel Rodriguez. He hasn't seen a wrestler like Kevin Lee before, and I am picking Kevin Lee to win this fight by decision. I also think that the fight does go the distance. We've got 2 tough fights here, and since we don't have really any statistics to speak of, we have a contender series fight for Ricky Turcios, but we don't have any statistics for Urbina Battle. So Turcios, he stand. Let me see if, I don't even have notes on these fights. You guys, Brady, he stands a wrestler. Ricky Turcios is good all around. We know that Turcios is the more experienced mixed martial artist here. He's got 6 more fights. He's got about 80 more minutes of cage time, about 5 more years as a pro. He-Stant is 6 years younger. He's only 22 years old. Both of these guys are about the same size. He-Stant training out of Sikjitsu, and our guy Turcios training out of Team Alpha Male. If we look at the finish stats, we see He-Stant has finished 80% of his 5 wins inside the distance. 2 by submission, 2 by knockout, 1 by decision. However, we do have to mention the records of the competition for Brady He-Stant. It's important. We're definitely not shitting on this young man. He's tough as hell. But just the guys that he's beaten so far. Philip Shriver at 0-2. Corey Conway 0-0. Jesse Jacobson 0-4. Jeff Coleman 0-6. And Shane Sargent 1-12. 18, 22, 24. That tells us that his in his wins, 1-24 record amongst those opponents. Now, that has been a narrative. That is important. But let's remember that the wins in the Ultimate Fighter house were pretty damn good. Now, we're not showing them here, but Kyle Reddinghouse is a big win, you guys. Kyle Reddinghouse has 2 fights against Sergey Morozov, and he beat him once, and they were both close. Kyle Reddinghouse has about 25 professional fights. That was a good win for Brady He-Stant. And then the guy that he beat after that, I'm not even remembering his name right now. I apologize for that. However, I think Brady He-Stant has got really good wrestling, a really good top game. He has shown to gas out in the past, and Turcios will not gas out. I think Brady He-Stant maybe gets this done early, But if he doesn't, I could see Ricky Turcios having a big third round and maybe finishing him, because Hiestand does have a game plan that is very exhausting. He's very big on the offensive wrestling, grappling, trying to hold people down. And Ricky Turcios is not easy to hold down. He's training a team alpha male. I think this is going to be a close fight, you guys. I could see Hiestand winning the first round. I could see Turcios winning the third round. It's just a matter of who wins that second round. Now, I like Turcios's experience. I like his well-roundedness. You know, he can get up. He's got good jiu-jitsu. He's got good striking, and he's got a really nice variety of striking. But I'm really impressed by the wins that Brady Hiestand got in the house and how he got them. I'm going to pick Brady Hiestand to win this fight by decision as an underdog. But no disrespect to Ricky Turcios. I'm looking forward to this fight. There's just not a lot of meat on the bone in terms of statistics, so I don't want to go too in depth here. Urbina Battle. This is another one. Brian Battle is going to be getting Gilbert Urbina on short notice here. Urbina was supposed to be Tresean Gore. Tresean Gore injured his knee about a week ago. So this is a fairly short notice fight for Gilbert Urbina. And Brian Battle beat a couple of really good guys in the house. Beating the wrestler, the guy in the second fight. He beat Petroski. And the first fight was also very impressive. This guy's got great striking. And not only that, he's won some fights via submission as well. Urbina is going to be the more experienced guy. Urbina's got one more fight. He's got 24 minutes of cage time more. He's got 5 more years as a pro. But we see that Gilbert Urbina has only got a 50% finish rate as a pro. 2 by submission, 1 by knockout. Brian Battle's finished 80% of his wins, 60% by sub, 20% by KO. And this is a guy who actually prefers to keep the fight standing. So it looks like he's found ways to discourage takedowns using his submission game. He has been subbed in his only loss, and Gilbert Urbina was decisioned in his only loss. You know, it's short notice for Urbina. I think Battle is probably the more skilled guy, but I'm going to pick Brian Battle with very little confidence here. I like the 3-inch reach advantage. I like the fact that he's not taking the fight on short notice. And I also like the fact that Gilbert Urbina showed very poor striking defense against Tresean Gore. I just believe that as the fight goes on, Urbina, his poor defense is going to be too much to overcome, as Brian Battle will probably land the harder strikes, keep the fight standing, wear him down. I'm going to pick Brian Battle by 3rd round knockout. And that is going to bring us to the main event, Edson Barbosa versus Giga Chikadze. Can't wait to get into this one with you guys. I did a main event deep dive on DFS by the Numbers channel where we talked about this fight for about 40 minutes. If you want to see a more in-depth analysis of that fight, check out the DFS by the Numbers YouTube channel. That just came out on Monday morning. Let me wet my whistle here before we go into this last fight. Okay, so we've got a 1-inch reach advantage for Edson Barbosa here, and Giga Chikadze is going to be 3 years younger and 1 inch taller. Giga is a flyweight, a career flyweight. I'm not flyweight, featherweight. And Edson Barbosa fought most of his career up at lightweight, has recently cut down to 145. He's going to be the slightly bigger guy here, I think, just beefier, bigger, stronger, although it shows that Giga is 1 inch taller. If we're looking at experience advantages, obviously that's going to go to Edson Barbosa. He's got 16 more professional fights. He's got 200 more minutes of cage time. He's got 7 more years in professional mixed martial arts. And look at this, 18 more fights at the UFC level. Over 200 more minutes in the UFC cage, and a 64% finish rate as a pro, 59% by knockout, 5% by submission. If we look at Chikadze, he's had an extensive pro kickboxing career before he got into mixed martial arts. He was in Glory. He's got 9 of his 13 pro wins have come inside the distance, 8 pro wins by KO, and 3 of Barbosa's 9 pro losses are by knockout. So there could potentially be a path to knockout here for Giga Chikadze. If we look at the striking numbers, right over here, we can see that both of these guys are excellent strikers. I mean, it's kind of hard to pick who's better here. Let me see what I've got written down. Why am I on that fight? Okay. Barboza is an excellent striker. He's got tons of power. He's got fantastic leg kicks. He lands 4.15 significant strikes a minute and absorbs 4.15. God damn it. I keep losing my spot on this fucking note page. I'm sorry, you guys. It's been a long night for me. But we've got 1.17 significant strike knockdowns per total significant strikes landed. He's averaging 0.73 knockdowns per 15 minutes. He's got a really solid 60% striking defense, and over a 25 fight sample size. And he's only been knocked down 3 times in 25 fights. So, that's 1,189 significant strikes absorbed for Edson Barboza, and he's only been knocked down 3 times. So that's pretty damn good. And for Giga, he's an elite kickboxer in his own right. He's got lethal body kicks. He throws that left leg to the liver from the orthodox stance. It's called the Giga kick. And once he lands a couple of those, if they don't actually shut your liver down, when he goes to throw that third one, you bring your guard from the head down to the body, and that's when the head kick comes, and that's when you get knocked out. Giga's he styles on people on the feet. He's got really nice power in his own right. 44% striking accuracy, but look at that 1.42% knockdowns per total significant strikes landed. And right there with Edson Barboza at 0.76 knockdowns per 15 minutes. Giga's never been knocked down, and he's showing a really nice 60.56 striking defense in his own right. So, yeah, this is going to be a really close fight in terms of the striking. If we look at grappling, I mean, neither one of these guys likes to grapple much. If we look at these numbers, we can see that Giga Chikadze 3% control time for, 8.77 against. So that's about 88% of his fights are taking place at striking range. That's fine with Giga. That's where he wants it. And then you look at Edson Barboza. He's only managed over 25 UFC fights, 6.64% control time. So he's not trying to control his opponents. He's attempted less than 1 takedown per fight, and he's gotten only 8 takedowns in 25 UFC fights. So it's very clear he's not trying to grapple either. And Edson's takedown defense is going to be better than Giga's. Giga's is about 69%. Edson's is about 78%. Giga gets taken down twice as much as Edson does at about 1.71 compared to about 0.99. I don't think that this fight is going to take place at all in the grappling realm. I think both of these guys are very comfortable striking. I think both of these guys are coming out with a lot to prove. They want to prove that they're better at striking than the other guy, not the better grappler, not the better wrestler. I think that Barboza wants to knock Chikadze out, and I think Chikadze wants to knock Barboza out. It's just that Barboza is going to be the far more experienced guy here. I think those leg kicks are going to make a big difference. And Giga Chikadze has shown really poor conditioning thus far in the UFC. And when he was in his Contender Series fight, he was talking to Felder and the guys, that were announcing prior to the fight. And he was being quite honest about the fact that he was fighting at 143 in glory. And then he was trying to knock people out in the first 2 rounds because he knew that he was cutting too much weight to make it down that low and that his conditioning wasn't going to hold up. And we've seen it. He fades late in fights. That's not surprising, seeing as he throws so much into each strike. He's trying to knock you out. So that conditioning is going to be huge because this is a 5-round fight. And Edson Barboza, if we look at these numbers here, we see that the ratio of the competition that he's faced is just slightly better than Chikadze, but look at the total fights. 13.24 for Barbosa, 5.14 for Chikadze. So it's just way more experienced competition that Barbosa's facing. And his wins, they have 12 total fights, while it's less than 6 for Chikadze, even though the ratio is the same. The average record of the guy that beats Edson Barbosa is like 10-6, with 15.67 total fights and a 1.66 ratio. Look at Paul Felder, Justin Gaethje, Dan EJ, Amir Khani, and Burgos. And then you look over here, you see Cub Swanson. He's good, but then Jamie Simmons, Omar Morales, Erwin Rivera, and then Jamaal Emmers, who didn't even try to take him down until 7 minutes into the fight and probably should have won the fight anyway. I like Barbosa's conditioning. I think his striking is on par with Giga. I think Edson can even get a takedown if he wants it, even though I don't think he will. But I like Edson's experience. I like the fact that he's fought lightweights while Giga Chikadze is really fighting just featherweights. I like the experience. I like the strength of schedule. And I like Edson Barbosa to win this fight. I'm picking him to win by 4th round knockout. I think that Giga's gas tank is just not going to hold up. And Edson Barbosa is tough as nails. I think once Giga realizes he's not going to be able to get him out of there after the 2nd round, he is going to fade fast. And we're going to see Edson Barbosa take over and win this fight. My God, we got through all of it. We got through 12 fights. And you guys are all in here still hanging out. We got DFS by the numbers saying Barbosa is going to break Giga and make him quit the 4th. Well, you picked him in the 4th too, huh? I'm picking him in the 4th. Yeah, I think that's the round that it happens, man. And DFS by the numbers saying I'm 1-1 on Giga bets and 3-3 picking against him, because Lee Van's in here saying Brady always getting burned by Giga. Brady, one of the original Giga haters. I was right there with him. We saw those guys' records, man. 1-32, 0-9, 0-10. So yeah, I mean, Giga crushed a lot of cans, but it got him here. And now that he's here, he's looking pretty damn good. So that's 12 fights. But you guys, there's still one thing that we got to figure out here. What is Uncle Weezy's ass shaving of the week going to be? And I mean, my God, there are so many potential, possibilities here. Petroski over Gilmore is a possibility. Muradov over Meerschaert is a possibility. Chirico over Alhassan is a possibility. JJ Aldrich is almost like minus 400 versus Vanessa Demopoulos. That's a possibility. I mean, Mana Martinez, a 24-year-old against a 41-year-old. That's a possibility. Dude, what the hell? Who are we going to pick? Who's your Uncle Weezy going to pick as this week's ass shaving of the week? Now, some of you guys are probably saying, it's an easy week. Who gives a shit? I mean, there's going to be so many people that shave ass on this card. This is kind of a foregone conclusion that he's going to get this right. Well, I am not going to pick one of the top 4 lines on this card. I'm not picking Mana Martinez. I'm not picking JJ Aldrich. I am not picking Andre Petroski. And I am not picking Makhmoud Muradov. My ass shaving of the week this week is going to be my guy Manzo, Alessio Di Chirico, going to be knocking out Abdul Razak Alhassan in the 2nd round of this fight. I'm picking it inside the distance. I'm making it harder on myself. I want to test myself this week. And it's been in my heart that this guy Alhassan is done. He's missing weight. He's not doing what he needs to do in order to be ready to fight at the highest level. He lost to Jacob Malkoun. He got wrestle fucked by Jacob Malkoun at 185 pounds, a guy with 4 professional fights. One of them was a 15-second knockout to Phil Hawes. I want to make it hard on myself. I want to pick Alessio Di Chirico to shave Abdul Razak Alhassan's ass. Let's remove the middle name Razak and call it Abdul Razor Ass Shave E. That's what's happening this week. Alessio Di Chirico shaves Abdul Razor Ass Shave E. Second round knockout. Book it. You guys are fucking awesome for hanging out with me for an hour and 20 minutes while I go through 12 fights of this card. I appreciate all you guys hanging out for the DraftKings show on Pub Sports Radio at 6, for the Uncle and Munkle segment that we did breaking down the Lee Rodriguez balls deep breakdown. And then lastly, but not least, just the tip, the full card, UFC Vegas 35. That this is, and you know what, Lee Van, how dare you? How fucking dare you? I made that up on the spot. I always knew that Abdul Razak Alhassan had a name that sounded like Razor. I did not just pick that to make that joke. Yes, it was a good joke. Yes, it was apropos. But yes, Alessio Di Chirico is going to be shaving that ass on Saturday night. And instead of taking one of the top 4 favorites to be my ass shaving of the week, I took the 5th to make it harder on myself. And I gave you a great joke. You guys are awesome. DXJC, thanks for hanging out. Monk, go check out Monk's channel. We got my guy Chris. Thanks for hanging out with us, Chris. Lee Van, good to see you as always, brother. And everybody else whose chats that I skipped over today, I appreciate you all hanging out with me. God bless each and every one of you. I am going to finish this beverage, walk my poor dog. I hope it's not pouring outside anymore. And I will be back later on in the week. Thursday, I'm going to be on Liam Picks Fights channel, breaking down that card, I believe, at 5:30 p.m. Central Time on Liam Picks Fights channel, the UFC Vegas 35 card with Liam, Paul Shaughnessy, and Al Mack. So stay tuned for that. And I think Brady might have something for you guys coming up on Saturday. I'm not gonna blow the lid off of what's happening there, but you guys might even see me one more time before the fights on Saturday. So thank all you guys for hanging out. I appreciate it. We will see you next time. God bless each and every one of you. Thanks for hanging out on Just the Tip. We'll see you next time.